Hello, welcome to what I'm calling this is a spiritual ascension, my journey. So just giving you guys my whole entire 5-year journey um, that I went through from April of 2020 through April of 2025. Hopefully you've watched the intro and the first portion. So I'm continuing from that first portion, okay? So there's going to be a continuous thing going all through my whole entire journey. So I had kind of left off saying that I had lost my son back in 2007. Um, After that, it was kind of just about more processing his death. I was alone in New York. I had my own apartment. I was working on Wall Street, very good company and job, making a lot of money. And if you know Manhattan, if you're not a tourist, there's very few things to do for someone who lives in Manhattan other than go out and eat and shop. So that was a big part of my life. And making the money that I did, that was the weekends, like they always say banker's hours, but bankers, it was not like that. I would get up probably 4:30 in the morning and leave the house by around 6. Um, I lived on in Upper Manhattan, very tippy top of Manhattan. So I had worked all through Lower Manhattan. And on the subway, it takes quite a while to get from one place to another. So then working from probably 8 to 5 every day. And by the time you leave work and maybe walk around a little bit or even go straight home, you're not getting home till like 6 o'clock or so. And since I got up so early, I was usually getting into bed by like 9 o'clock. So I didn't really socialize that much like during the week. On the weekends, I would go sometimes to different events, or I used to be able to get into all the museums for free, um, go shopping, um, you know, do random things like that. There was a park nearby where I lived, Inwood Woods Park. I forget what it's called, but a very top of Manhattan, beautiful park. Um, and I would go walk in there, was really trying to, be more healthy. And really from 2008 to 2013, that was kind of my life of just, and I had a really good friend at that time. Um, Actually, my best friend, who I had met in New Jersey maybe over 10 years before that. And we had done a lot together. So there was four of us that would always get together and go to different events. And um, they would come up to my house. I would go to New Jersey and stay the weekend, and we would go out and just have a really good time. There was different events in Harlem I would go to. Um, my job also provided a lot of events. The opera I would go to. I used to go to the Philharmonic. I went to the ballet. I was exposed to a lot of the arts, like really Broadway shows. It was really like a fun life. Um, and I was older too, so I wasn't like one of these young um, people working on Wall Street in their 20s that were trying to go out to the bar and everything. I wasn't doing all that, just really kind of living my life simply and not simply really, but not doing the extremes of, what 20-year-olds do. And I had a lot of money and a lot of money to spend, and all those years kind of just on my own. And also like looking for a partner, looking for someone since my divorce, wanting someone to spend, the rest of my life with. And actually, I ended up going to therapy. Someone had said, to process your son's passing, do you think about going to therapy? And I kept putting it off and putting off. And I said, okay, maybe it's time now. And I found a really good, I wanted a therapist who um, understood religion because I was dealing also with trying to take myself, how do you say that? Trying to deal with the guilt that I felt for leaving the religion. And I needed to also probably talk about that too. Um, I'll probably talk about that in the next video. But I found a therapist, and not only did he help me with the passing of my son, processing that, but also now of no longer wanting to be a part of that there, being part of a religion that just I didn't vibe with any longer. So um, that was difficult. Um, but he did help me a lot during that time that I did go see him. By the end, he had said to me, I know you say that you were looking for a partner or whatever, so why don't you, go online and seek someone? I was like, no, the online stuff, it doesn't work and so forth. And he was like, well, just try it. So put it on pause for a second. So he said, try out the online dating. So I said, okay, I'll try it. Um, I think I went on 2 dates, two different guys, and they bombed. And then I met a guy who like I really liked, and we started seeing each other. Um, there was more of a friendship than a sexual chemistry, but we got along like really well, and we liked spending time together. Um, my apartment was getting expensive. And if you know Manhattan, it's very expensive to live in Manhattan. I had already been there, what, 6 years? 6 years, yeah. And so the rent went up every 2 years. And he lived in, if you know New York area, he lived in Westchester County, which is right above Manhattan. And us going, visiting each other and so forth. Um, that went on for about a year or so. He kept talking about his sister, that she was a psychic medium. And I had grew up knowing like that was bad. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. Of course I would like to meet your sister, but I don't want to know anything about what she does. And he kept talking about that she had a store. So I wasn't really putting everything together. And his mother had Alzheimer's, and we would go up to visit her in upper New York state. And his sister lived nearby. So one day we ended up going to his sister's shop, but I didn't realize it was a um, a spiritual shop. And he said to me, he says, "Well, she likes when you buy something." So I was like, "Oh, okay." But I said, "I don't want to buy anything in there because that's all, like devil stuff." And so I went around and I was looking around and I'm seeing tarot cards and all kinds of other stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. But I can't act like I'm weirded out because, this is his family. And, um, you know, I just was trying to act normal. So I'm saying, okay, what can I buy in here that's not going to be too? So she had small crystal rocks. And I said, well, let me just buy a couple of these and, leave it at that. So I went up to the cash register to pay for them. And one of them was a tiger's eye, remember? And so I'm, handing her the tiger's eye and the other ones I had in my hand. And she says to me, she says, um, do you have to take the elevator? Because I had talked to her before, and I think we had talked about getting together or something like that. It's like she would come into New York and we would go to a Broadway play. And she said, so she said, you have to go upstairs to get to your apartment. And I was wondering why she was saying that. And I said, well, there's an elevator. And then she said, you have three pictures on your wall. And she says, but one's different. The way it is, it's different. And I remember I had pictures of my kids on my wall in my bedroom, but the one of my son that had passed was hanging slightly different than the other ones. And I was like, how does she know that? And then all of a sudden she said to me, she says, he's here. I'm like, who's here? And then she started to bring forth my son. And she was telling me things that from him that she would never, I'm almost tearing up, that no one would ever know. The things that he was expressing through her. And then my father came through as he had died in 2003. And I was in shock. And the things that she was relaying from both of them, I was just there with my mouth hanging open because, as I told you before, I had been brought up to believe when you die, you die. That's it. There's nothing else to you. And now she's bringing me my father and my son through, and they're alive and they're still here. And I remember walking out of her shop, and it was my first spiritual awakening that, oh my goodness, that I can't believe all this time I believed that my father and my son, I'm sorry, I'm choking up, my father and my son were gone. And it's only that their flesh was gone, but they're still here, you know, in spirit, that their soul forever lives on. So that's when everything changed for me. Like everything changed. Um, I'm going to leave it here because I'm all teary eyed. I hope you'll join me for the next segment. And I'm just going to continue through until I get up into the current day. And so at first I thought this might take me like a month to do, but now I'm thinking it's going to take me a lot longer to tell my entire story. Okay, so I'll see you in the next one.